Today's episode is sponsored by First Cup Coffee. Go to firstcup.com, use my promo code Liz, and you can get 10% off. Guys, you're going to need a cup of coffee for this episode today. We are now at the point where we are 1 month out from the attempted assassination of President Donald J. Trump. 1 month out. And yet, what do we know about this attempt to murder the former president of the United States? We don't know much. Let's just say that. So today what we're going to do on the show is we are going to walk through the timeline of events, exactly what we know and when we knew it, or more importantly, what Secret Service and law enforcement knew and when they knew it, and why they didn't take action after they knew what they knew when they knew it. And then we're going to ask 10 questions that we need answered about this attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Also, Tulsi Gabbard has been put on the terrorist watch list by the Biden-Harris administration. Yes, Tulsi Gabbard. My friends, this is one of those moments, like Dinesh D'Souza when he was targeted by the Obama administration, like Alex Jones when he was censored on big tech. Mark my words, this is one of those watershed moments. They are targeting Tulsi Gabbard for one specific reason. We're going to talk about that today during the show. Also, police call logs, which have been revealed thanks to a Freedom of Information Act request from the Las Vegas Police Department, substantiate the reports that Joe Biden did, in fact, suffer a serious medical emergency. We knew he did. This precipitated the coup that Kamala Harris staged against him. We're going to break that down. And we have video showing Biden admitting himself that, yes, he was pushed out. Welcome, everybody, to The Liz Wheeler Show. It's a new season of The Liz Wheeler Show. What this show won't be: boring, old, ineffectual commentary. Go tune into Fox if you want the generic political yammering that got us into this mess. Small assumptions allow big lies. So The Liz Wheeler Show will challenge everything. On this show, it's be based or our country dies. What does it mean to be based? Stay tuned. Because we believe in spiritual warfare on this show, and we do, we begin this show with a prayer. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl through the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. My friends, there is spiritual warfare around us all the time. We are part of it, especially those of us who are doing this show, you and I. Whether we acknowledge it or not, we're part of it. So it is time we acknowledge it as we fight the absolute evil that is taking hold in our country. And of course, part of acknowledging the reality that we are part of spiritual warfare is rooting our worldview, our politics, in reality. Guys, here's a story the mainstream media doesn't want you to be talking about. Remember when the FDA told us that ivermectin was just a horse medicine, a cow medicine, and they actually had the audacity to post on social media and say, "You're not a horse, you're not a cow, seriously, y'all, stop it." And then they told us that ivermectin was not effective against COVID, even though studies show that it is. Well, now the FDA has been forced to retract those statements. Yes, they have. They've actually been forced to delete those social media posts because the posts are false. Let me show you something. See this? This medical emergency kit from the wellness company has ivermectin in it. Yes, the dreaded horse drug, the cow drug that is effective against COVID. I have this medical emergency kit not only because it contains ivermectin, but because it contains prescription medications that help treat over 30 other diseases and illnesses and infections. And who knows when either the FDA or the deep state or our supply chain is going to cause one of these medications to be in low supply when we need it. I highly recommend that you prepare for, we know this is going to happen again, right? The FDA, this is their playbook. Be prepared. Get your medical emergency kit. If you use my promo code Liz, you can get $30 off. Just go to twc.health/Liz. Use my promo code Liz. That's twc.health/Liz. Use my promo code Liz. Okay, we are 1 month out from the attempted assassination of President Donald Trump, and to say that there are a few questions that need to be answered would be the understatement of the year. We are going to catalog the 10 questions that you and I, as American citizens, must demand that our government, which is supposed to represent us, answer. But first, we want to say thank you to American Heart for Gold, one of our partners on this show. In all the time that we have been alive, the US dollar has always been the primary currency. But that may not be the case much longer. The US dollar is facing unprecedented inflation. And our politics, I don't need to tell you this, is getting increasingly unstable. And if that wasn't scary enough, the government is looking to take total control of our money with the new digital dollar. Remember what the Canadian government did to those truckers? Yeah, that's what our government's going to do to us if we accept a new digital dollar. That's why it's never been more important to take control over your wealth. Don't let your life savings become a casualty of failing banks or currency wars. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings, your retirement accounts by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. With the finest products, amazing customer service, and a buyback commitment, American Hartford Gold has a 5-star rating from thousands of reviews and an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. And American Hartford Gold supports content like this that is committed to bringing you the truth. Tell them I sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. Call them now. You can click the link in the description of this episode, or you can call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172. Or if you prefer text messaging, you can text my name, Liz, L-I-Z, to 998899. Again, the phone number to call is 866-996-5172 or text Liz to 998899. Okay, here's the story of the day, and here is the based take on it. It is almost unbelievable, my friends, that we are 1 month out from the attempted assassination of President Donald J. Trump, and we don't have any answers about this. Take a step back here with me and think about how many books, how many documentaries, how many articles, how many YouTube videos, how many official investigations have happened about the assassination of JFK. It is almost unlimited. If you did a Google search on any given day of the JFK assassination, the results would take you years and years and years to scroll through. And yet, a mere 30 days from when an assassin fired bullets at the head of the 45th president of the United States, who is also the Republican nominee for president, up for election in 2024, less than 3 months, 30 days later, the media just doesn't care to ask any of these questions. I call foul here. And so what we're going to do on the show today is we are going to read a timeline of events from the day of the shooting, minute by minute, second by second, and we are going to demand from our government that they answer questions which should have been answered the second that this shooting happened. In fact, this shooting should never have happened, as is evidenced by this congressional record. So what I'm about to read to you, was entered into the congressional record as of August 1st, 2024 by Senator Ron Johnson. At 4:26 p.m. on the 13th of July, 2024, per media reports, Beaver County officers first notice and send a text in a group chat about an individual later identified as Crooks. Crooks, of course, was the attempted assassin. This is 4:26 p.m. That's an important time, so mark that in your mind. 4:26 p.m. At 5:10 p.m., a local law enforcement sniper positioned in the American Glass Research, from now on we're going to refer to it as the AGR building, American Glass Research Building. This sniper, AGR Sniper 1, because the sniper was assigned to that building, first spots Crooks. That's 5:10. At 5:14, AGR Sniper 1 takes 2 pictures of Crooks. So we are now 50 minutes, almost 50 minutes, 48 minutes from the initial text message about a threat, a specific threat identified as Crooks at 5:14. Fast forward to 5:30. According to Acting Director of the Secret Service, Ronald Rowe, former President Donald Trump arrives at the Butler rally site over an hour after this threat has been identified. At 5:32 p.m., AGR Sniper 1 observes Crooks looking at his phone and using a rangefinder. And this is where I want to stop for a second. We are at 5:32 p.m. on July 13th of 2024. It has been 1 hour and 6 minutes since the Secret Service first identified Thomas Crooks as a potential threat by name, by location. Donald Trump has arrived at this rally. A Secret Service sniper, counter sniper, has observed with his own eyes this threat who has been identified looking at the stage where Donald Trump will stand in just moments with a rangefinder. What do you use a rangefinder for? You don't use a rangefinder simply to see how close you are to the president. Am I close enough to hear him? Am I close enough to smell him? Am I close enough to touch him? That is not what you use a rangefinder for. There is but one reason to use a rangefinder, and you would think, of all people, law enforcement who are tasked specifically with the protection of the President of the United States would understand this. That is at 5:32. At 5:38 p.m., AGR Sniper 1 sends a message to a group of other local law enforcement snipers working the rally about Crooks. So there's 6 minutes that elapsed between AGR Sniper 1 noticing that Crooks was using a rangefinder and sending a text message to local law enforcement about it. 6 minutes. You would think that would be an instantaneous thing. I notice a threat that's been identified as a suspicious person using a rangefinder. I immediately notify my superiors and we take action. But no. Hold tight, because that'll play into our questions in just a couple of minutes here once we've gone through this timeline. Per media reports, at 5:38 p.m., AGR Sniper 1 includes the pictures he took of Crooks and a description, along with that Crooks was observed using a rangefinder in the direction of the stage. So now, my friends, everyone involved in the security of President Trump's rally is aware that there is a suspicious person. They are aware of his location. They are aware of what he looks like, and they are aware that he is using a rangefinder to zero in on the stage where President Trump will speak in just moments. All of those facts have been established by 5:38 p.m. At 5:40 p.m., AGR Sniper 1 is told to call into command about Crooks, which means superiors who make that call. Now, again, notice the lapse of time. It was from 5:32 to 5:48 minutes elapsed between when AGR Sniper noted that Thomas Crooks had a rangefinder and to when he notified his superiors about it. At 5:41 p.m., AGR Sniper 1 sends a description of Crooks and his use of rangefinder to command over the radio. At 5:45 p.m., a sniper with Butler County sends the images and description given by AGR Sniper 1 of Crooks to one of the Secret Service counter-snipers at the rally, including that Crooks was seen using a rangefinder in the direction of the rally stage. The Secret Service counter-sniper responds, "Roger, I'll notify teams on AGR's side." Acting Director Rowe, that's the Secret Service acting director, the man who took over from Kimberly Cheadle when she resigned in disgrace for allowing this to happen. Acting Director Rowe confirms the Butler County sniper sends the Secret Service counter-sniper team leader a text with the images and description of Crooks. So it was local law enforcement snipers who first observed Crooks. They notified the Secret Service, but not for about 10 minutes after. I think it's 13 minutes to be exact. At 5:53 p.m., according to Acting Director Rowe, the Secret Service counter-sniper team leader emails the Secret Service counter-sniper teams that, quote, local law enforcement is looking for a suspicious individual outside the perimeter, lurking around the AGR building. At 6:03 p.m., former President Trump takes the stage at the Butler rally. Now, this is one of the most important questions of all, and we will dive into this in more detail in just a minute, but there are a few moments that I want us to put a pin on. This is one of them. Why was President Trump allowed to take that stage when local law enforcement and Secret Service, both sniper teams, both commands, knew of a suspicious individual, had photos of him, knew his location, and knew he was using a rangefinder? Why was President Trump allowed on that stage? And why wasn't he notified so that he could make that decision whether to take that risk himself? At 6:03, former President Donald Trump takes the stage at the Butler rally. At 6:06 p.m., according to Federal Bureau of Investigation Deputy Director Paul Abate, video shows Crooks pulling himself onto the AGR building rooftop. That's 6:06 p.m. Approximately 6:08 p.m., a video taken by James Copenhager, who would later sustain a gunshot wound at the rally, Copenhager, appears to show Crooks moving across the roof of the AGR building. At 6:08:20, a local law enforcement officer reports over the radio that there is someone on the roof of the AGR building. So let me pause right there. We now know that both local law enforcement and Secret Service weren't just looking for a suspicious character that they believed was lurking nearby around the perimeter. They knew that this individual, who they had already identified as a threat, was on the rooftop of this building. At 6:08:32, a local law enforcement officer reports that there is an individual on the roof of the AGR building wearing white shorts. So they definitively, irrefutably have eyes on the threat. At 6:10:04 to 6:10:19, this is 2 minutes later, a rally goer records a video that appears to show Crooks on the roof of the AGR building. In the video, a person can be heard trying to get an officer's attention, and another person said, "He's on the roof, right there." We are now at the point where even civilians on the ground, rally goers, attendees, this is so obvious that everyday people have noticed this, identified this as a threat, and are trying to direct law enforcement, begging them to protect the president from this threat. At 6:11 p.m., according to media reports, Crooks points his rifle at a local police officer who is boosted onto the roof of the AGR building. The officer subsequently drops from the roof to the ground. That one is hard for me to get past. So you're tasked with protecting the president and this rally from a threat, and when you face the threat, you drop back off the roof. What was done to neutralize this threat that pointed a rifle at you? Oh, you hid. Okay. Now, I'm going to get a lot of criticism for saying that, because there will be some people watching this show who say, listen, when you're faced with life and death like that, a lot of people drop back. And I understand that. But why are you a police officer if you were unwilling to take this risk? Why are you a police officer if you are unwilling to fulfill your duty to address this threat? People, President Trump to be specific in this case, is counting on the protection of these people. If you're unwilling to do it, that's fine, but don't take the job in the first place. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh, but remember, the end of the story is a bullet grazed the head of President Donald J. Trump. This is not a joke. At 6:11 p.m., FBI Deputy Director Abante's congressional testimony confirms this point, the police officer dropping off the roof as well. At 6:11 p.m., according to Acting Director Rowe, quote, a member of former President Trump's protective detail contacts their Pittsburgh field office to inquire about the radio update that there was an issue local law enforcement was looking into near the perimeter. At 6:11:03, a local law enforcement officer reports over the radio that the individual on the roof of the AGR building is armed and is laying down. According to the FBI Deputy Director Abbott, the officer who reports this is the same local police officer who was boosted onto the roof, the one that dropped back down. At 6:11:11, a local law enforcement officer reports over the radio that the individual on the roof of the AGR building is armed with a, quote, long gun. At 6:11:33 p.m., a local law enforcement officer reports over the radio that shots had been fired from the AGR building roof. Media reports place the first shot fired at 6:11:33 p.m. At 6:11:34 p.m., according to media reports, 2 more shots are fired. At 6:11:37 p.m., according to media reports, additional gunshots are fired. At 6:11:40 p.m., a local law enforcement officer reports over the radio to lock down all roads. At 6:11:52 p.m., according to media reports, a final gunshot is heard. At 6:11:52 p.m., an alert tone is sent over multiple radio channels. At 6:11:57 p.m., an emergency traffic-only announcement is sent over multiple radio channels. At 6:12:11 p.m., a local law enforcement officer reports over the radio that the shooter is down. At 6:12:18 p.m., command confirms receipt of the radio report that the shooter is down. At 6:12:20 p.m., a sheriff's officer reports on the radio that the shooter is down. So what is the main takeaway from this congressional report? As I said, it was entered into the congressional report by Senator Ron Johnson. The main takeaway is that from the time that President Trump was shot, it was over an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes prior to that, when local law enforcement and Secret Service were aware in a detailed way of this threat against him. And yet, this threat was allowed to proceed to the point that he attempted to murder the President of the United States. And that brings us to the questions that we must demand answers to. I don't care if it's been 30 days and the mainstream media has no interest in asking these questions. It's a commentary on the character, not of the corporations themselves, but the individual journalists that work for everywhere from MSNBC to CNN to the Washington Post to the New York Times, that even if they disagree with the policies that President Trump stands for, that they are so entrenched in their hatred of half of the country, you and I, of conservatives, that they are not only incurious, but that they deliberately bury this story. It means they not only don't care what could have happened to President Trump had he not turned his face at the last second, but that they are willing to allow it to happen again. So here are the questions. Question number 1. What was Thomas Crooks' ideology? This is something, the reason that we're asking this question is because it's important. I refuse to allow mass shooters, whether it's school shooters, whether it's terrorists, whether it is attempted would-be assassins of the President of the United States, I refuse to allow them to be portrayed as mere crazies. And the reason that I say that is if we journey back to the Covenant school shooting, the shooting that took place at the Christian school in Nashville last year, where a trans-identifying individual committed this act of mass murder against Christians because they were Christians in the name of gender ideology, we still are not allowed to have access to the Covenant School Shooters Manifesto precisely because the left wants to hide the political ideology that motivated this shooter. The political ideology that motivated the Covenant School Shooter was queer theory. Queer theory being a neo-Marxist ideology that tells LGBTQIA identifying people that they will be targeted for genocide if they do not stop, and by stop I mean kill and overthrow, Christians, white people, conservatives, government, those running our country. It is the vanguard of a revolution. That is what that ideology is. That's why that ideology is hidden from us. So it is not right to dismiss these shooters by saying they're random crazies. We don't want to give them attention because that spurs copycats. We don't want to give them the notoriety because that's what they sought. No, that is not often what they seek. Often what they seek is to live out this ideology that has been ingrained in them from the public school system to the media from leftist politicians. From every side, these people are indoctrinated in leftism. So obviously leftists want to hide their ideology. We must demand to know what was Thomas Crooks' ideology. And what was known about Thomas Crooks before the shooting? It's awfully strange to me that a young man who qualifies as being part of Gen Z has no social media footprint. This is so unrealistic, it's almost comical. Gen Z lives online. They were born, their teethers were smartphones and tablets. There is no way that there is not a digital trail of the ideology of Thomas Crooks, and yet it's being hidden from us. Why? We must find out the answer to that. Question number 2. Thomas Crooks flew a drone over the Butler County rally area some hours before Donald Trump took the stage. Not only is this unbelievable that he was able to do this, there's an additional element that is worth noting here. The U.S. Secret Service generally has counter-surveillance drones flying over an area to identify if there are drones, hostile drones that are flying over that area to help them identify threats. On this day, July 13th, 2024, the U.S. Secret Service counter drones weren't working. They failed to fly U.S. Secret Service counter drones in the way that they normally would. My question here is, why did these U.S. Secret Service counter drones not work? Who was in charge of them? Was it a mechanical issue? Was it a communication issue? And most importantly, was it unusual for the U.S. Secret Service counter surveillance drones not to be working? The answer to that question, my friends, will tell us a lot about whether this was pure government incompetence, whether this was a pure inside job, or whether this was wokeness and corruption that indirectly allowed this shooting to happen. Question number 3. At 3.5 minutes prior to the shooting, Thomas Crooks was seen on the roof. At 30 seconds prior to the shooting, Secret Service knew he was armed and lying on the roof. We established that a few minutes ago. Who then made the call, made the decision not to remove Donald Trump from stage at that point? When law enforcement was aware of an armed, credible, and accessible threat to the life of President Trump, who allowed him to stay on stage? This is a critical question. Who made the call not to tell Donald Trump before he went onto the stage so that Trump himself could decide whether he was willing to take that risk or not? All that would have needed to happen was they should have held President Trump for 5 more minutes, neutralized the threat, arrested Thomas Crooks, and then let President Trump take the stage. Why did that not occur, and who exactly was in charge of that decision? 26 minutes before the shooting, this is 18 minutes before Trump took stage, Secret Service knew that Thomas Crooks had a rangefinder. Why was he not neutralized at that point? Why was he not confronted? Why was he not arrested? Why did it take until he had fired those shots for him to be addressed? Who was in charge of that decision? And we know that there was one police officer that saw him several minutes before the shooting and backed down. But who was in charge those 20 minutes in the interim? Who made that decision not to confront Thomas Crooks? Question number 5 here. This is a question that Senator Mike Lee posted on X. 3 snipers were assigned to a window overlooking that infamous sloped roof that now disgraced former Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle said was too dangerous for her agents to guard that roof because it was sloped. 3 snipers were assigned to a window overlooking that sloped roof, but all 3 of those snipers abandoned their post moments before the shooting. Why? Where did they go? Who gave them the direction to leave? This particular question gives me very eerie shades of the Jeffrey Epstein guards who were supposed to be looking at video monitors showing the cell door of Jeffrey Epstein every couple minutes, and yet for the entire night, that night that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered, they weren't. They had abandoned their posts suspiciously in this isolated way that one night. This is very eerie shades of Jeffrey Epstein guards. 3 snipers assigned to that window abandoned their posts moments before the shooting happened. Why? Who gave them that direction? Where did they go? Who are these snipers? We must get testimony, congressional testimony, under oath from those particular snipers. And this leads me to question number 6. And I don't mean this question to sound bombastic, because I don't mean it bombastically in the slightest. Are we willing to consider that the feds may have groomed Thomas Crooks into an attempted assassination of President Donald J. Trump? The reason that I'm asking this question is not because I'm suggesting that this happened. The reason that I'm asking this question is because if we look at the history of our country, we know that our government has abused citizens in the past. We know that our government has targeted politicians that the deep state dislikes in the past. We know that our government has murdered the President of the United States in the past. We know that the CIA was involved in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. We know that the CIA has been involved in many shady murders, many grooming of violent criminals and murderers into committing those very crimes. We know in recent years that the FBI was involved in fomenting the riots outside of the Capitol on January 6th of 2021. We know that the FBI was involved in entrapping ne'er-do-wells and homeless people, drug addicts, into pretending to stage the kidnapping of Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer in the name of lockdown protests so that the federal government could paint any lockdown skeptic as a violent extremist. We know our government has the capacity, the capability, and yes, the motivation to groom someone who would otherwise be willing to commit a heinous crime to actually commit that heinous crime. And again, I'm not suggesting that this happened, but if we are unwilling to even consider this possibility, if we are unwilling to even investigate whether this happened, if we come at this analysis with preconceived notions or preconceived conclusions that no, the government couldn't have been involved in any way, then we are no better than the mainstream media. We cannot fully examine what happened here if there is even one preconceived conclusion that we're bringing to the table. So if you sit there and you say, no, I'm not willing to consider that feds might have been involved in some way, then you are not actually willing to investigate what truly happened. And we owe it to our country to investigate what truly happened. Remember, the Secret Service, this is my 7th question. Why did the Secret Service lie about denying resources to the Trump campaign when the Trump campaign requested additional security? What was the justification for the denial of those requests, and who made that call? The 8th question is a question that is for the elected representatives of the United States of America. This is both Democrat and Republican. Do you care that the former president of the United States was targeted for assassination? Do you care that this could happen again? Do you care what the implications of this would have been had Donald Trump not turned his head at the last second to look at that chart that Border Patrol had prepared for him about illegal immigration in our country? Do you understand that this would have thrown our country into a civil war? Do you care? Question number 9. Are there any more known threats trying to gain access to President Trump or to his family? If so, what's being done to protect them so that what happened on July 13th does not happen again? The 10th question is a practical question, but it will disgust you as much as it disgusts me to know that the investigation, the formal investigation that's being conducted into what happened on that day, is being headed by the acting director of the Secret Service, who is the former deputy director of the Secret Service. His name is Ronald Rowe. He was involved in decisions leading up to the July 13th attempted assassination of Donald Trump. The failure to protect Donald Trump is as much his responsibility as Kimberly Cheadle, and yet now he's the one supposedly conducting oversight and investigating what happened. I think not. My friends, it's been 1 month since Donald Trump was almost killed on stage at a rally because leftists have spent the last 8 years calling him Hitler and a dictator and authoritarian and telling LGBTQIA identifying people and black people and women that they are on the verge of genocide, that our democracy is under attack, and that Donald Trump is the reason why. That this hatred and fear has been fomented to the point that someone is willing to murder President Trump rather than letting an election take place and people pick our chief executive. And yet we know nothing about what happened except for a timeline that demonstrates moment after moment, second after second, failure after failure that almost led to the death of our president. We deserve better from our government if our government is truly by the people, for the people, and of the people. Former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard has been placed on the terrorist watch list by the Biden-Harris administration. And I'm laughing about this, not because it's funny, it's not funny, but because it's almost comical how bold the left has become in targeting everyday American citizens for the specific reason that those citizens are dissenting or challenging the deep state or radical leftist ideology in general. This is one of those watershed moments, my friends. This is one of those watershed moments. If we journey back and rewind the clock about 10 years, we can identify some of these watershed moments that the left has used to see how far they can push us. And what I mean when I say that is think about Dinesh D'Souza. When the Barack Obama Department of Justice charged Dinesh D'Souza with a campaign finance law violation, the reason that they charged him with this nitty-gritty, nebulous, vague, over-donation statute was because they didn't think conservatives would defend Dinesh D'Souza. And Dinesh D'Souza had the audacity to criticize the Obama administration. You might remember his documentary, Obama's America. Barack Obama did not like that documentary because it was accurate, it was true, and it was damning. So what did Barack Obama do? He targeted Dinesh D'Souza. He thought, this will be a good test because there was a tiny infraction that was committed that, by the way, law enforcement never go after leftists for committing, even though leftists do the same thing. But Barack Obama thought to himself, let me see if I try to charge Dinesh D'Souza with this crime. Will conservatives push back? Will there be outrage? Will we be forced to retract this charge, or will we be able to get away with intimidating and censoring and criminalizing a conservative because he criticized King Barack Obama? Well, conservatives didn't push back enough against that. Barack Obama got away with it. So then we fast forward a couple of years to Alex Jones. Alex Jones was banned from every platform online. He was banned from Facebook. He was banned from Twitter. He was banned from every social media platform where he spoke to his audience. Why was he the one targeted? Why was he canceled so entirely that they tried to erase him from the internet? Because he was a threat to the left. And the left, again, They picked Alex Jones because he had said some unpopular, untrue things about Sandy Hook. No one wanted to be associated with those things he had said about Sandy Hook. And so the leftists who were targeting the deep staters thought, we'll target Alex Jones and see if conservatives will defend him. And if they don't defend him, then voila, we've moved the Overton window. Now we are one step closer to censoring and silencing mainstream conservative voices, quote unquote, mainstream conservative voices, because we made up the playbook with Alex Jones. If it floated with Alex Jones, we have precedent. If someone says something untrue, somebody engages in so-called disinformation or hate speech, well, we already silenced Alex Jones. We already canceled him. We'll do it on someone else. And of course, most conservatives did not defend Alex Jones, even as he was canceled and deplatformed and silenced and depersoned, because they didn't want to be associated with one thing that he said. Well, this is another moment. Former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard has been placed on the terrorist watch list. Let me tell you what this means. This means, according to Off the Press, and this is a quote in this article from the Air Marshals National Council, the president, the executive director, Sonia Labasco, Gabbard is unaware that she has 2 explosive detection canine teams, 1 transportation security specialist, explosive specialist, a TIA explosive specialist, 1 plainclothes TSA supervisor, and 3 federal air marshals on every flight that she boards. What? So let me get this straight. A former Congresswoman of the United States who is currently a U.S. military member has a team of, how many is that? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, has a team of 7 federal agents on every flight that she boards. And yet, at the same time, the Biden-Harris administration is putting illegal aliens who have committed a crime crossing our border. We have no idea who they are. They don't even have IDs. Many of them are single military-aged males who may or may not be involved with cartels, drug traffickers, human traffickers, or terrorist groups on planes and flying them to cities across the country. But they don't have a team of 7 federal agents on every flight with them. This is one of those moments. Tulsi Gabbard, on July 22nd of 2024, went on Fox News and criticized Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and the national security state. One day later, on July 23rd, 2024, this is according to Undercover DC reporting, Tulsi Gabbard was placed on the terrorist watch list. She was aware of this only because on her boarding pass, there was a quadruple S on her boarding pass, SSSS. That is a notation for TSA agents on the ground in airports to say, wait a second, this is someone who is on a terrorist watch list. They are moving the Overton window. They are hoping that conservatives, because Tulsi Gabbard is not a conservative, she's not a Republican. She does align with a lot of Republican outrage over deep state and censorship and infiltration of our agencies. She maybe should be a Republican, but she's not. And so the Biden-Harris administration is hoping that you won't notice, because what they're doing to Tulsi Gabbard, oh yeah, they want to do to you. And pretty soon they will if we don't push back and demand that they stop this. Now, I understand that the topics that we're discussing today, whether it be the attempted assassination of President Trump, whether it is Tulsi Gabbard being put on the terror watch list, whether it's what we're about to talk about, which is police call logs actually prove that Biden had a medical emergency when he was in Las Vegas just days before this coup that was staged against him, it can make it feel like this nebulous they, are out to get us. And that's not my intention, to portray the events of modern American politics in that way. However, what I am committed to on this show, which I know you appreciate, we have talked about this many times, is challenging every assumption. And part of challenging every assumption is letting the facts dictate the narrative of the story, not coming to these stories with a preconceived idea of what they mean. And so when we look at this next story, I'm going to show you this video. I want you to listen to this very closely, because these are the call logs from when Joe Biden was in Las Vegas. He was supposed to speak at an event. The event was abruptly canceled. Biden was rushed back to the East Coast. And you remember, we talked about this on the show 2 weeks ago. Charlie Kirk reported just days after that there was a massive cover-up that was happening, that Joe Biden had actually suffered a serious medical emergency in Las Vegas. He didn't just test with mild COVID symptoms and he was going back to Delaware to quarantine. That something much more serious was actually happening, that hospitals in Las Vegas had been notified that the President of the United States was on his way, and it was only at the last minute that the president was diverted to the airport and flew back to the East Coast. Well, that reporting was substantiated, of course, by not just by Charlie Kirk, but by Jordan Schachtel at the Dossier, by Red State, by Jennifer Van Laar over at Red State. And now, because of a Freedom of Information Act request to obtain the actual phone calls between police officers at the time, this story has been irrefutably proven to be true. Take a listen to this.
We're on the radio. Right now, POTUS is 421. He's being seen, so we're kind of waiting to see how this is shaping out. So for everybody's knowledge, he's 421 right now. We're just trying to figure out what's going on, and we're going to go from there.
Okay. That phrase, the POTUS is 421. What does that mean? Well, POTUS means President of the United States. 421 is a police code that means the individual being referenced, POTUS, is either injured or ill. So the POTUS is 421 means President Biden was injured or ill. This story was true. President Biden suffered a serious medical emergency in Las Vegas, and we were not told about it. This was a cover-up staged by President Biden's team, by the people controlling President Biden. This is not speculation. This is not unsubstantiated reporting. This is reality, and we have the proof to substantiate it. And then, of course, we have Biden admitting, he went on television and admitted that, yes, he was actually the victim of a coup. He was pushed out. This is Joe Biden in his own words. Take a listen to this.
What polls we had showed that it was a neck-and-neck race. Would have been down to the wire. But what happened was a number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races. And I was concerned if I stayed in the race, that would be the topic. You'd be interviewing me about why did Nancy Pelosi say, why did so, and I thought it'd be a real distraction.
Yeah, he thought it would be a real distraction. The real story, of course, when he says his colleagues in the House and Senate, he means Nancy Pelosi, he means Hakeem Jeffries, and he means Chuck Schumer. The real story, so there was a report a day or two after this coup was staged against Joe Biden that Barack Obama was actually the one who started this coup, that Barack Obama called Joe Biden and said, listen, we even have your Vice President Kamala Harris on board to invoke the 25th Amendment, meaning this constitutional remedy to get rid of a president, to get a president out of the Oval Office if that president is no longer mentally competent for the job. Seymour Hersh actually reported the day after, 2 days after, that Barack Obama threatened Joe Biden with the 25th Amendment and said that he had built a coalition to make this happen if Joe Biden did not step down. So Joe Biden was blackmailed into stepping down. So when Joe Biden goes on TV and says, a coalition of my colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I would hurt down ballot races, yeah, that's not exactly what happened, but it's just an admission enough that we can see reality. Joe Biden was, in fact, pushed out. He was the victim of a coup, and even Nancy Pelosi admits that this happened, and that the way that Joe Biden is, quote-unquote, governing now by sending letters to different parts of his administration instead of speaking personally to them, which, of course, makes it very unclear who is writing these letters, who is signing these letters. Does Joe Biden even know that these letters are being sent? Well, Nancy Pelosi herself asked that question. Take a look at this.
I didn't accept the letter as anything but a letter. I mean, there are some people who were unhappy with the letter. Let me say, some said that some people were unhappy with the letter. I'll put it in somebody else's mouth. Because it was I don't even know, it didn't sound like Joe Biden to me. It really didn't. But
please tell us what you told President Biden to persuade him to step aside.
Well, I've never shared any conversations with a president of the United States publicly, no.
It's said that he's furious at you. Is he?
Well, he knows that I love him very much.
I understand that you don't want to own this, but it is so well reported that you were the leader of a pressure campaign.
No, I wasn't a leader of any pressure party. Well, let me say things that I didn't do. I didn't call one person. I did not call one person. I could always say to him, I never called.
She's such a masterful liar. You don't have to be the one to call. Your people will call. Nancy Pelosi, We know that Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama were behind this. We know this for a fact. And what Nancy Pelosi is doing right now is she's raising the question, well, that letter didn't sound like Joe Biden, in order to distance herself from having a finger pointed at her, and people saying, Nancy Pelosi, you were the one that helped Kamala Harris stage this coup. You and Barack Obama and Kamala Harris staged this coup and forced Joe Biden out of office, which is the most anti-democratic thing I have ever heard in my entire life. They don't just want to silence Joe Biden because they didn't like him anymore. They thought he was a political liability. They don't just want to silence Tulsi Gabbard because she's criticizing the national security state. They don't just want to silence media reports about the Trump assassination attempt, even though we're 30 days out from the attempted murder of the former president of the United States. If they had the opportunity, they would do this to us too. And again, I don't say this to sound hyperbolic. We know that European countries, such as the United Kingdom, are usually one step ahead of the United States when it comes to this incremental descent into socialism, communism, and tyranny. They adopt things like socialized healthcare and hate speech laws just a moment before the United States does. Well, we can look to the United Kingdom to see exactly what they are doing to know what the leftists in the United States want to do to us next. To that end, police in the United Kingdom say that their quote-unquote hate speech law even applies to retweets on X, and you can go to jail for a retweet. Take a listen to this.
We will throw the full force of the law at people. And whether you're in this country committing crimes on the streets or committing crimes from further afield online, we will come after you.
From further afield online, what does that mean, sir? Are you saying that here in the United States, if I retweet something that you, a British police officer, don't like, that you will extradite me to charge me under a hate speech law in the United Kingdom? Yeah, you might want to think about that a little bit further before you follow through on that. The last time the British people, or the last time the British government, I should say, tried to take away the rights of American citizens, you lost a war and we created the greatest country the world has ever known. In other words, get lost, you loser. But this is what the leftists here in the United States want to do to us. This is not just some random psychotic police officer, some lunatic law enforcement officer with too much power in the United Kingdom. This is exactly verbalized what the leftists in our country want to do to us. In fact, Kamala Harris has done this before to a very well-respected investigative journalist and my friend, David Daleiden, when David Daleiden investigated Planned Parenthood for committing absolutely heinous crimes. Planned Parenthood deliberately harvested body parts from abortions, from babies that they had aborted, and sold those body parts for profit, which is against federal law. Let me repeat, it is gruesome, it was deliberate on the part of Planned Parenthood, and it is against federal law. And when an investigative journalist exposed Planned Parenthood's lawbreaking with irrefutable video evidence, Kamala Harris, who was then Attorney General of the state of California, did nothing to Planned Parenthood and confiscated the videotapes from David Daleiden, who to this day is still entangled in lawfare being aimed at him that started with Kamala Harris. He released for the very first time some of the footage that was seized by Kamala Harris that shows Planned Parenthood discussing exactly how they break this law. Take a look.
So now every time I do a D&D, I'm like, oh, there's some law.
Yeah, you already know, huh?
I was like, where is this? I was like, where's my guy who can play with the tissue? I was like, because they're like trying to sort it, and I was like, I'm like picking up some more, like, you know, they're like, well, can you show us a sample from today? And I'm like, I was like, this is a really bad day for us.
I remember you mentioned that there was one that day.
And it was like one bad sample. It was like a 16-year-old kid.
Who's gone?
It was like a 16-year-old kid, so we just had to hurry up. Whereas like other days, it's like more intact, where it's like maybe only like an arm that's disarticulated.
I don't know which part of that video is most disgusting. They were committing a late-term abortion on a baby inside a 16-year-old girl. Oh. One of the reasons that the 2016 election was so successful when it came to the pro-life message, one of the reasons that President Trump embraced such a strong pro-life stance in 2016 was because of these videos. Because of David Daleiden's reporting, the Center for Medical Progress is reporting on the criminal behavior of Planned Parenthood. And this is not just a process crime. This is not just some vague thing on the books that they didn't report properly. This is absolutely grisly, inhumane behavior that they are laughing about over drinks, that they are discussing. I mean, this is demonic You can't look at that and not feel sick to your stomach. The reason that President Trump was so strongly pro-life in 2016 was because these videos were widely circulated. So what happened when this was making a difference in the 2016 election? Kamala Harris, who at the time was Attorney General of California, seized that videotape so that David Daleiden couldn't release it, so that you and I and everyone else in this country couldn't see it, so that it wouldn't impact the outcome of the election. And she targeted David Daleiden under the law. Because she wants to do to you and I exactly what she's done to David Daleiden, exactly what the UK police is doing to everyday citizens, exactly what our government is doing to Tulsi Gabbard, exactly what the media and the Democrats and the deep staters in our federal government have done to President Trump in this assassination attempt. They want to silence us. But fortunately, you and I have this platform, and we will never go a single day without challenging every assumption. Guys, make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube and hit that bell too. YouTube likes to downgrade stuff like this in their algorithm. So make sure that you're notified every time we drop a new episode, a new report, a new interview. And if you're over on Apple Podcasts, leave me a review, 5 stars, please, pretty please. And tell me what you like about the show and who you'd like me to interview next. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.